Hello, everyone. It's PL Stewart here with the amazing Steve Talks Books. Welcome back to Page Chewing. We just finished one broadcast and now we're in another. That's why we dubbed this Jam-Packed June for Page Chewing, because we have so many fabulous interviews with amazing creatives in the writing community, which we love. And today we have another amazing guest, and none other than the Bjørn Larssen. Welcome, Bjorn, to Page Chewing. We're very honored to have you here.
I'm very nervous to be here. Thank you. And honored.
Well, you don't look nervous. So I do see two amazing books that I love peeking out over your shoulder. Would you like to tell us anything about those two books?
Those? Well, those are my two very different takes on Norse mythology. Children, the blue one with the bird. This one. That's kind of grimdark. And the one next to it with a cartoon cover is absolutely not grimdark. At the same time, it's the same universe, and the stories will interlock as I go on with the series.
Those are beautiful covers. Do you do your own covers?
Yeah, I had the illustration for Why Odin Drinks commissioned from a wonderful Icelandic illustrator, Chelsea, because I saw her illustration. Someone posted one on Twitter, and I thought, this is it. This is perfect. This is the style I want. And I messaged her, and she told me that was her first commission. And it went great. So now she's working on the cover for the next book in the series, and I'm already excited. And I actually had this cover before I had the book. So that was really motivating to go on writing, because I just wanted people to see that cover. And I'm doing the same with the second book in the series. I want to already have the cover, so I'm more motivated to write.
Yeah, those are gorgeous covers. For those of you who aren't aware, most tuning in now from writing community are familiar with the self-published fantasy blog off run by Mark Lawrence. And Bjorn had entered Children in last year's iteration, and it did really well in the cover contest. So see the medal. So that's how phenomenal his covers are. So kudos to you for that, Bjorn.
Thank you.
Definitely. And with them being in the same universe. Oh, do I lose you? Listen when you're back.
It's working for me now.
Okay. You're back. Let me write that down.
I was saying thank you. So yeah, I think you'll have to edit this one.
No worries. I'm writing down the time, so no worries at all. With the two books being in the same universe, were you nervous to change to go from grimdark to something a little different? Was that a choice you made just to kind of explore different ideas, or what made you make that decision?
It was actually a bit random. I was writing Children, which is dark, and it's based on a lot of autobiographical events. And then world started doing whatever it is that the world is doing in the last few years. And when Children was with my editor, I didn't really feel like writing anything else that would be dark. So I started writing just funny stories, kind of silly, but also with the gods in the same universe. And I had like 6 sketches or something, none of them finished. And then Children came out, and I was sort of free, and I really didn't feel like working on another dark book. So I thought, well, I'll finish one story, the first creation, and see what happens. Just, throw it out there. And then people loved it, and people wanted more. And I did not expect that. I wasn't prepared. I had all those, like first drafts, or even not that.
Wow. Children is a book that truly resonates with me. I still think about it. Bjorn and I talk about that all the time, that it's such a phenomenal book. All his books are incredible. Steve, you might be interested to hear that. And I don't want to take credit for this because I believe I was one of the first people to point this out, that children definitely has a horror vibe, a horror element to it. And I remember chatting to Bjorn about this, and then recently he had a fabulous review from another writer that highlighted that as well. And I was like, see, told you so. So Bjorn, can you tell us about some of the darker themes that you do explore in children?
When I was actually writing the book, I didn't realize that some of those topics were so dark, because a lot of it is autobiographical, and I was undergoing complex PTSD therapy as I went. And a lot of stuff that I've written was actually me. And some of it I wasn't conscious, those were my memories even. So I finished this book and I thought it's actually kind of funny, but it's got those two really dark scenes. And I thought, okay, I'm going to put content warnings just for those two scenes, even though the rest is really light. And then another writer told me that she had to take breaks while she was reading the book. I was like, oh yeah, in chapter 4 and 7. He said, no, all the time. She just had to put it down and take breaks. And I told another writer that, who blurbed the book, and she said, yeah, me too, I had to take breaks. So PL, you told me that you found Boy like a very much a horror character. But you know, when you rewrite those when you rewrite those scenes 40, 50 times, you stop feeling that. It no longer feels terrifying. It just feels like, am I getting this right? So, well, there is Boy. I talk about mental illness and addiction, which is something that I'm drawn to exploring. Those are subjects that are important to me. There's parental abuse, which I didn't really think about as parental abuse until I saw a review in Grimdark magazine that said it. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. That's what it is, actually. And classism, how people who are higher in the hierarchy can treat those who are lower for no other reason than just because they can.
Wow. Sorry, Steve, you were going to say something?
What I was going to say, I was just going to ask, was writing therapeutic for you when you were writing the books and going through the whole process?
Yes and no. The thing is, well, some of the things I was writing, when you do the PTSD therapy, it kind of goes layer by layer into your past. You don't remember certain things and then they come out. But I have actually written them in the book without realizing. So then at therapy, we would get to something and I would think, oh shit, that scene is actually really dark. I would suddenly start understanding what people meant. But when I was actually writing that, I didn't realize. I really didn't think this book was so dark or heavy at all.
Wow. And then because, and I say you're frankly one of the most multi-talented authors that I know, you can switch genres. It's not a big deal for you. You know, you've written historical fiction. You know, children is the darker, more grimdark, and then I believe Why Odin Drinks is essentially brilliant comedic satire, a la Pratchett, like with some some dark themes, but very much satire. Is it hard for you to switch from writing one type of book to another?
That's actually a really stupid thing to do. Because if you want to, if you want to have some sort of branding, then you really shouldn't do this. Because right now I have 3 books out, and it's a bit like, if you liked one of my books, then I have nothing else to offer you, unless you're really open-minded. But I just like a lot of things. And Storytellers came from a dream. And I wrote it the way it was supposed to be. I didn't intend to write historical fiction. It just happened to be that. And then I knew I wanted to write about the Norse gods and the Norse universe. And that's how Children happened. And then I wanted to, kind of get something lighter. And that's how Why Odin Drinks happened. I didn't plan this. So I guess I'm just messy. Oh, yeah. And I was writing contemporary romance, but I took a break from that now.
Wow. Yeah, just the range of your skills, Bjorn, is just, I mean, it's just incredible. The fact that you can write, you know, write that well in so many different genres, you know. And for those of you who are unaware, Storytellers, Bjorn's first debut novel, historical fiction, was an award-winning book that, you know, is still selling, you know, like crazy.
I actually don't have it here, unfortunately.
And yeah, phenomenal book. And if I'm and please correct me if I'm wrong. We've talked a lot about all your writing, but Storytellers also was somewhat of a love letter to Iceland, which is somewhere that holds a place dear in your heart. Can you talk about that at all?
Prepared.
Yes. When I was writing the first draft of Storytellers, I just had a story. I had no setting. And I was listening at the same time to the first album by the Icelandic singer Ásgeir. And suddenly I had this realization that Iceland is an actual place. Because in my head, Iceland was, you know, like that Björk comes from there, and they probably have ice and like Blue Lagoon and stuff. But I never really thought of Iceland as an actual place. So when I started doing research, it just felt like Iceland was created especially so that I could set my book there. And then when I went, I work with runes. I'm a heathen. And I asked the runes what to expect before I went, because I was just going for a few days for a research trip. And the runes said that I would go to the land of my ancestors and I would lose something there, and I will never guess what it is. So, of course, I spent the rest of the time trying to guess what it is. And then I stepped out of the plane, I stepped into the airport, and I was home. And it was such a weird feeling because there were, you know, all those signs in Icelandic, and I didn't even know how to pronounce that. And I was home. So we stayed for a few days. And during those few days, I decided to do something I never do. I opened my laptop late in the evening to look at Facebook messages. And there was a message from our landlady. How are you liking the lights? I was like, what lights? I said, there are northern lights right now. So we ran to some Voyagers so far. Actually have a small one to this statue. I think a lot of people know this. So we ran to the big one, and we just stood there for 45 minutes watching the aurora. And I think that did it for me. I just, this became the place for me. I have never seen anything like Iceland, and not just the aurora, but mountains, the moss, the lava. Even you're driving down the motorway, and I was happy that my husband was driving, because I could just look around and be like, oh, this is so pretty, but don't look now, focus on driving. It's a really one-of-a-kind place. And in Storytellers, I really tried my best to show what I have seen and what I have tasted and smelled. And I just felt that it was a really lousy job, because you really cannot write this kind of thing. And then in reviews, I read that it was a very cinematic book. And I thought, no, you have no idea. It's really not good. So now I have to set more books in Iceland to get it better and to have an excuse to go again.
Yeah, such a beautiful, an amazing book, and somewhere I would love to visit as well. And my understanding is that you and your husband plan to retire there one day if things work out. So, you know, definitely, you know, expect to hear a knock on the door one day when Deb and I show up, say, hey, we're here, show us around, because that's definitely on my bucket list of places.
I'd definitely love to show you around if I have a chance. Yeah, I kind of started working on my husband and sort of, you know, putting it into his mind that we might want to move to Iceland, maybe. And he wasn't so much into it, but if you work long enough, then, you know, the idea kind of grows roots.
Yeah.
So at this point, we just need to win the lottery and we're off.
That is amazing. That is amazing. So, you know, we have the privilege, Steve and I, of interviewing all these incredible creatives and all fascinating people, and you're definitely one of them. You've lived this amazing life. You've been a model. You've been a blacksmith. You're a math whiz. You're a best-selling, award-winning author. Tell us how your life experience has. You've told us a bit about the fact that children, you felt it was a bit autobiographical. There's some elements there. Like, tell us how all your life experience has influenced your writing.
Well, first I'm just going to say that the person you interviewed before me today was Miles Cameron. And honestly, I think when it comes to cool, I don't register on the scale when Miles Cameron was before me. So you definitely interview very interesting people. I come from Poland. I lived my first 29 years there. But I think I was the first person in my family to actually go abroad, because during communism, you couldn't actually have your passport. The government had all the passports, and you could lend your passport from the government if you gave them good reasons. So nobody in my family ever went abroad until I have. And I saw London, I saw Amsterdam, Berlin, Vienna, Prague, and I just liked everything better than Warsaw, to be honest. So I decided I was going to move abroad, and I didn't know where. I ended up picking Amsterdam because I just happened to know two people in the Netherlands. I found a job really quickly. That was my graphic design time. I was one of the best designers in Europe at that point. So I only had one, well, technically two, because the first and the second. So I had one interview here in Amsterdam, and I got the job. And I accidentally moved into the red light district without knowing what I was doing. I lived there for a year, and a year in a red light district is enough. A few years later, I had a burnout as a graphic designer. And I actually felt sick when I tried to open Photoshop. I felt physically sick. So I was I was panicking a bit. I've never done anything else. I have no idea what I'm supposed to do now. And I went to a career psychologist, and she said, well, in this case, you are equally qualified for anything, same as you're equally unqualified for anything. So just, think about what you would like to do, whatever it is, even if it seems silly. And I was not thinking about blacksmithing. I was thinking, well, what else is related to graphic design? Maybe architecture, which I would have to study first, this kind of thing. But I happened to be briefly dating another graphic designer with a burnout. He told me that he actually worked with a blacksmith on a fence for a Sheraton hotel. And he showed me drawings, and then he showed me the fence. I was like, how did that work? He said, I designed it in Illustrator, and then the blacksmith made it. And kind of blew my mind, because I didn't realize blacksmiths, still just worked. Yeah. That this was a job you could have. So I contacted that particular blacksmith, and I had my first class, 6 hours. And that was very similar with when I met my husband and when I landed in Iceland. This was it. This was the thing I wanted to do. I just wanted to be a blacksmith. So normally I'm actually quite shy, but when I want something so badly, I got myself a course from the best blacksmith in Poland, the leader of the Polish Blacksmithing Guild. Then I found a place in Amsterdam where I could practice. And it just became, I don't want to say obsession, but I was living and breathing it. The modeling was kind of on the side. That was never a career. It was just like a session here or a session there. And then when I got my back injuries in 2015, I was really devastated, because I thought, well, I am losing the love of my life. I really tried. I tried to go on working, but the pain was just so bad I couldn't. And I was sitting in a chair all day, in a profile chair. And the only thing I could do really was either read on my e-reader, because even a paperback was too heavy, or use the laptop. So I thought, well, I have this story that's been kind of following me for years, and I have a lot of time. I cannot say I have no time now. I'm going to start writing, I guess. And that was how Storytellers started.
Wow. So from that came, an award-winning book, right? That's incredible. Um, so now that you've been writing for a while, you've published, several books. How do you look back on your writing journey and where you are now, and where you think you're going with this all? Like, how do you assess all your success, because you enjoyed quite a bit of success, and to where you are now, and where you're going with what's in the future for Bjørn Larssen when it comes to your writing?
I have no idea, and that's the best thing. When I started, well, I was just writing Storytellers in the beginning just because I wanted to escape from the chair. I was sitting just in pain in the chair, and I really didn't want this to be my life. So I was writing this story, and then I came up with the idea that it could be set in Iceland. And we went for a few days to Iceland. And suddenly I was doing all sorts of research and corresponding with university professors in Iceland. The second book that I started writing, I did not publish that. And trust me, the world and my career are all the better for it. Because I started believing that maybe I am so good that everything I write is going to be good just, by the virtue of being made by me. And it really was not good. But what came out of that book was one character, and it was this kind of sarcastic young woman who always wore black. And she had a lot of bracelets back then, and her name was Maya. So when I came up with the idea for children, which was called something else back then, the idea was to write the Norse mythology from the point of view of characters you don't read about in the surviving lore. So Magni is the son of Thor, and there is only one mention of Magni in the whole mythology until the very end, when after Ragnarok, Magni and his brother take the hammer of Thor back to Asgard. So I thought, how did Magni experience all this? Like, imagine that you have those incredibly famous parents, and everybody just looks at you as, the son of. I actually saw a picture of Prince Harry, and Prince Harry was really badly stressed mentally. And I thought, imagine this, he has no job other than being the son of. He will never be the king. He will never have anything to say, and he will always have those photographers waiting here. And the only thing that people will want from him will be access to people who actually can achieve things. Prince Harry would always be the son of. He would never be his own person, and he would only be useful to photographers and to people who he could serve as, getting access to people who are actually important. And I thought, imagine being a son of a god, and a god that has, so many stories about him, and is basically a super pop star in the Norse world. And there you are, you're his son, he pretty much disowned you, you look the same, and you're trying to have a life of your own, but you cannot because you are the son of God. And people want things from you, but what they actually want is access.
Yes.
They don't really want you, they don't care for you. And it was like Maya has looked at what I was writing, and she was like, oh, I like this, I'm moving in. Half of this book is mine now, by the way. She was not supposed to be in this book. She just came in, and I was like, but I don't really know what to do with you. And Maya was like, well, that's not my problem. So that was what happened with children. And with Wild and Drinks, I kind of already had the characters, because the gods, the actual Norse mythology is largely character-based. It has less plot than you would think. A lot of the plot is like, Odin wanted the mead of poetry, so he went and killed the troll and got the mead of poetry, and then he shed it all over Asgard. I'm sorry, but that's true. That's not an awful lot of plot to work with, but you learn something about Odin from this. And when I started the Why Odin Rings series, I already knew where those gods are going to end up when they grow up, so to say. They're going to be like they are in children. But what were they like in the beginning when they didn't know who they were yet? How did it all start? So that's how it went from the actual writing point of view, and how it went from the success point of view. Well, Storytellers looked for a while like it would just be one of the indie books that kind of fizzle out within a few months. And well, it really looked like this. In October 2019, it looked done. And while I was working on my horrible second book, at the same time, you kind of tell yourself, oh, I don't mind. I don't really think about commercial success. I'm totally above that. But of course, you think about commercial success, because if you didn't, you wouldn't publish the damn book. So I was looking at it, just like, and then all of a sudden, in November, it shot up again. And December was the best month I have ever had. And I was selling paperbacks and hardcovers. And I realized, holy shit, people are buying my book for Christmas as presents. There are people somewhere in the world buying my book to give it to somebody else as the best present they can think of. And that was mind-blowing. That was possibly more mind-blowing than anything else later with this book. When Children came out, I already had, I knew some people and some people knew me. So there were certain expectations. I didn't really want to push the release too much, but I had a few fans that I would post anything on Facebook and the reply would be, can I pre-order Children already? So that went into the world. And I think people were surprised, because I think most people expected the new Storytellers. And then, of course, I moved towards humor to make it even more of a nonsense. And people who were expecting another Children got Why Odin Drinks, and they like it. But I haven't actually planned anything. I kind of try to plan things, but then I kind of do, oh, shiny, and I forget what it was that I was going to plan. But things just grow. And I am partly very, very excited watching just things, grow. Like when I got the audiobook contract for Storytellers.
Yes.
It was just an evening, and I look at my emails, and there's an email from someone I don't know asking if the audio rights for Storytellers are still available. I was like, oh, it's probably spam bot from my website, right?
Yeah.
That was real. I got an audiobook contract.
Congratulations.
And I was looking at it and just thinking, when I started writing this book, I was just sitting in a chair, barely able to move from the pain. And I'm getting, this publisher asking if they can publish the audiobook exactly on my terms. All artistic decisions are mine. The cover is mine. I choose the narrator, everything perfectly as I want it to be. How did I get to this? And since then, I've had quite a few moments that were like, how did I get here? And I always remember where it started when a thing like this happens.
That's incredible. And as someone who's a big fan of your work, Bjorn, I'm a testament to say you got it because you're a phenomenal writer, because you earned it. Your books are fantastic. You're brilliant. I am privy to some information that you were speaking about, some of the great highlights and big moments that you've had, over your writing career. Can you share any other potential big moments that have happened to you recently?
Potential big moments. Oh, let me think. I asked Joanne Harris, the author of The Gospel of Loki and Chocolat and a lot of other books, if she'll be willing to read Why Odin Drinks. I just thought, doesn't harm to ask. And she said, yeah, I wouldn't mind reading. I don't promise you a quote because I just have so much work and so on and so on. And I knew, of course, that this means that if she doesn't like it, she will just be polite about it. And then yesterday I get this message saying, I loved it, and here is your quotes. And I also thought that she would read like maybe next year when she gets to it. And instead it looked like she actually just, went and read the whole thing. And I was sitting there staring at that message. And I told you, specifically you, that I have no idea how I'm feeling right now. Because that's kind of beyond happy. That's just surreal. The Joanne Harris reading my book and telling me she loves it. Today, which is one day later, I'm reading The Guardian, and I'm reading an article about some book or other, and I go on reading, and it says, Joanne Harris, the chair committee of Society of Authors, and I kind of had to go like, breathe. On one hand, of course, she's a normal person, and we all started somewhere. On the other, this is the Joanne Harris.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's another of those, how is this happening to me moments?
Yeah, and I was literally jumping up and down at my computer for you, just reading that.
I think you were much more excited than I was, because I was just so confused. Like,
I still
what is
can't
happening?
I still can't even contain myself for you. I mean, for those of you who aren't familiar with Joan Harris, like she is a huge deal. And like as Bjørn said, we're all human beings. We're all, mortals on this earth. But in terms of eminence, especially in the Norse, the Norse, mythology side, she is huge and a huge writer and social media influencer, and just like that is just a huge, just a immense accomplishment of Bjørn, and so happy for you and so proud of you and so well deserved, because you are that great a writer, and so you and I talk about all the time, because as writers we tend to periodically experience imposter syndrome and feel inadequate about our writing, but then you don't realize when you've achieved certain things, certain benchmarks that perhaps other writers who certainly maybe be just as capable haven't achieved them yet. So you don't realize how important or influential you may appear to another writer. How have you handled this success? Just like you said, the feelings like I don't even know how to feel that Joanne Harris, for my book. Like, how have you handled, winning awards and writing best-selling books, and how do you cope with success?
It's really funny, because the way you talk, I'm starting to think, do you think you're talking to George Martin or something? Success is a really relative thing. I know that some people sell maybe one book a month, and then someone else sells 10 books a month, and that first person thinks, holy shit, that other author is like super successful. And that other author looks at someone who sells 100 and thinks, well, that other author is super successful. And it kind of goes like that. And then on top you have like 4 or 5 really mega stars that can just pretty much fart on the page and sell millions of that. So obviously that's not the sort of successful I am. I am more successful than I expected at any point, but also I'm less successful than a lot of people that I look at and that I know. I don't know. I don't think about it in terms of dealing with it. I actually tell myself sometimes that I'm getting arrogant, because I see that people will tweet something like, I haven't sold a book for months. And I'm like, oh, there I was getting really anxious because I haven't sold a book for 2 days. Like, here's the comparison for you. Here's the proportion. But this is not the kind of success that Joanne Harris has, for instance. And Joanne Harris doesn't have the sort of success that J.K. Rowling has. J.K. Rowling is worth like $1 billion or more. I don't know who J.K. Rowling looks up to. I think herself in the mirror, honestly. But yeah, success is very relative.
Yeah, true, true, true. So, speaking of Joanne Harris, speaking of you, I look to you as someone who is an expert in Norse mythology, and I know you're too humble to admit that, but not me alone, but quite a few of my writer friends look to you as an authority on Norse mythology. You know, Norse inspired fantasy specifically, and Norse books, Norse movies, Norse TV shows. You know, they've been all the rage for quite a while. What do you think it is about Norse that gets people so, just so lose their mind over, Vikings, the show, and, Loki, and, like, what makes that element of legend so, so captivating? What draws people to it?
Well, there's actually kind of three separate things. One is Vikings. And a lot of the Norse-inspired fantasy is actually Viking-inspired fantasy. And all of this bloodshed stuff and, burn, rape, pillage kind of stuff. But that's not really Norse-inspired. That's extreme masculinity-inspired. And then you have the Marvel universe, where you have this, you have Chris Hemsworth in his costume with like those 6 huge nipples on it. And he's all blonde and has no beard. And I'm like, I don't think you paid a lot of attention to what Thor looks like. But also what Marvel does, and sorry if I interrupt me if I go too nerdy there, but Marvel made a sort of Christian acceptable version of the Norse pantheon, because they have the All Father interpreted as literally the God Father. So they have Odin on top, and then they have the good son Thor and the bad son Loki. And it kind of goes from there. So the polytheistic religion actually becomes monotheistic with side characters that are kind of really important in various movies. And the truth is that Norse faith has never been like this. Odin has actually been exiled from Asgard at some points. In certain countries, Odin wasn't really celebrated at all. Loki is mostly avoided by real heathens because Loki is chaos. There is no such thing as evil in the Norse faith, but there is chaos. There is peace and chaos. And the Norse have many gods of fire, and Loki is the forest fire. It's the fire that consumes and destroys. I don't think that's in the Marvel movies. And also the part that interests me, the actual Norse gods and worlds, is I think the one that's the least popular. I was trying to make a list of not as much retellings of Norse mythology, because Neil Gaiman, for instance, he just read the original myths and just wrote them kind of down in, accessible language, but he doesn't change stuff. And what I do is I read all that, and then I start making things the way I want them to be. So it's kind of why I love it being called the Norse expert, is that people actually think that what I have written is how the Norse mythology actually goes. I saw a few reviews of Why Odin Drinks saying that if I knew more about the mythology, I would understand more of that. And I'm like, no, if you knew more about the mythology, you would be like, oh my God, what is this guy doing? So I'm really fiddling with it and changing stuff around however I want. And then I have to remember what I've changed. So I'm going to actually start writing blog posts about it. And PL, you partly inspired that by saying that I'm the Norse expert. And I'm going to start explaining why I'm not, why you shouldn't believe any word I'm saying.
Well, you had me fooled pretty good there, if that's the case.
But also, more seriously, when I worked as a designer, I already learned that first you have to learn the rules, and then you can start breaking them. If you don't know the rules, if you just do whatever, then you're not going to end up with a good product. If you know the rules first and then you start messing with them, then you're going to make something special.
Okay. Oh, wow, that's amazing. I do want to give Steve an opportunity. I know there were some questions that people on Twitter had posed for Bjorn. I know we can listen to all day. He's a fascinating guy.
I got lost. Yeah, listening.
Yeah, I got lost in him talking too. So, yeah. So,
cool. The first one was from Julio Carlos. His question was, "How jealous are people of your French braids? They are awesome."
That actually does come from Vikings, the TV series. Ragnar in the beginning has this kind of mohawk sort of hairstyle, and then it grows. He doesn't have French braids. He has kind of cornrows, dreadlocks. I'm not entirely sure what it is. Mm-hmm. But for me, French braids are kind of, easier. So I had a mohawk. I've pretty much, most of my life, I had some sort of mohawk. And this is just me growing it out. So this is a very long mohawk. And my husband makes it into a French braid.
Nice.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
That's a big mohawk.
It's awesome.
At this point, it's 2 years and 8 months of growing.
Nice. I wish I could do that. It just goes straight up whenever I try and do it. So.
It's good for a mohawk.
Yeah, it could be. Elizabeth had a question. Perhaps you should research what members of the Bulgarian Guard wore. They were in some very warm climates. There must have been been a summer uniform. I understand why they wore a ruby on their left ear. I know you appreciate authenticity.
I have to admit I haven't researched them, but the summer uniform thing came from me dressing the way I do, because tunics and kaftans and generally the Viking gear were mostly made for colder climates. And yesterday we had 31 degrees here, and I don't have anything that's Viking related that I could work at 31 degrees. So that's where it came from. Like, I had this thought, what would they wear during a heat wave? And then I was like, where exactly did they live again? I don't think they had a lot of heat waves there. So I have to dress in a very either untraditional or very traditional way, in a just vest when it's really hot. But I might try and look up the summer uniforms. I don't have space for rubies, I'm afraid. I have tunnels. But it sounds really cool, doesn't it? A ruby in the ear. It just sounds really cool.
Yeah.
It does sound very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds cool. Was there any other questions, Steve?
I think that was it. I'll keep looking though. There's a couple of threads, so I'll keep looking.
Okay. I did want to ask Bjorn. So, what do you like to read? What sort of books does Bjorn Larssen like to read? And especially because you write in such diverse genres, what do you like to read? What are some of the authors that you read recently that you really appreciate? Some authors that have influenced your writing, perhaps? Like, can you tell us about your reading?
I think that's actually exactly why I write multi-genre, because I read multi-genre. I remember when I was writing storytellers, and I was reading this writing advice that you should write what you're reading. You should write your favorite genre. And I thought, I never really read historical fiction. So I started reading some historical fiction while I was writing my own. I read a lot of nonfiction. I read biographies and memoirs and autobiographies because I want to learn how people think. I like memoirs about, I do read memoirs about mental illness and addiction because I want to understand, what happens, what is the process. And then one of my favorite books of all times, of course, is Bridget Jones's Diary.
Yes.
I'm saying hello to Tim Hardy here. We share the love for Bridget. Some of my favorite authors are Julio Cortázar, who writes this. They call it magical realism, I believe, but I think it's just imagination let completely loose. Cortázar has Like Cortázar doesn't do limits.
Hmm.
If it's an idea and he can come up with it, then it's going to be in a book. And you're just kind of trying to hold on, and you're like, I have no idea what's happening, but it's incredible. And I read a lot of romantic comedies, and romantic comedies is kind of not a great label, because my favorite book of last year was The Heart Principle by Helen Hoang, which is filed as romantic comedy, and it's not really a comedy. It's a book about an autistic woman and about a man who had very drastic surgery, trying to learn from each other how to feel more complete again. And I read that book, and the last time actually was Bridget Jones. I finished the last page, I flipped from the beginning, I started reading it again. So I take inspiration from that, and then from Marian Keyes, who was also called the chick lit author, and who writes this really deep, amazing literary fiction that's really, really funny. And fantasy, I actually read much more fantasy written by the indies. I used to read a lot of fantasy when I was a kid, and I haven't really realized how kind of monotonous it all was. It was all big white guys doing things, and women were either there to be rescued or to be raped in this or other order. And at some point I stopped reading fantasy, and I think I started feeling that. I've read all these books 1,000 times in a way. And then when I discovered the indie fantasy, I found out there was so much more, so much that doesn't get published. I mean, traditionally didn't get published. And so many incredible authors who they don't as much push boundaries, they define their own, redefine them. And it's like PL, that I read The Drowned Kingdom, and it gave me so much to think about religion, about discrimination. And a few years earlier, I've read Fortune's Fool by Angela Ward. And I originally scored it 4 stars, and then I had to go back to Goodreads and change it to 5 stars because I couldn't stop thinking about that book. And it just happens so much with indie books that I picked some traditional fantasy, and I didn't like it. I was like, I think I've read this book already.
Yeah.
So now the SPFBO, the self-published fantasy blog off, is taking place. And I'm sort of co-judging. I'm not really a judge, but I'm somewhere in the background. My team calls me the ghosty. And I picked 2 books, and one of them is an awful lot like reading the Bible in a fantasy version. And one I haven't started yet I'm going to quote from the cover because I haven't started yet, so I don't want to say what it is, but it has oversexed nuns with water pistols in it. So, those are just 2 books. So imagine all the range between those 2 books. Like, there's so much that can happen there. I still read a lot of trad books, like Helen Hoang, for instance, but when it comes to fantasy, I go to indies.
Yeah, there's just a plethora of unique, fiction out there, speculative fiction in indie writing that, again, it's unparalleled. I totally agree with you, Bjørn. You just don't find it in traditional publishing typically. Now, and speaking of that, you and I have discussed this a lot, the 2 of us, about traditional publishing versus indie publishing. And you essentially have a traditionally published audiobook, almost traditional contract, similar to what we get for. What do you think about the traditional publishing industry? Would you ever be traditionally published? You're a best-selling, award-winning author. Is that something that you're looking towards? What do you think about where the industry is going? And you talked about some of the differences between indie and traditional. What you see in terms of the scope of indie writing is so big and it's so so diverse. And what do you think's going on with traditional publishing versus indie publishing? Where is it all going?
The traditional publishing is imploding and it's going down the dumper. That's the shortest summary of what I think. There used to be the big 6 publishers. I think now it's down to big 4.
Yeah.
Or is it big 3 already? I don't really pay that much attention. And it's all very, I cannot avoid saying this, it's all very white. So traditional publishing has discovered diversity, which basically means that they discovered that non-white people also have money. And it's starting to get like more queer content because queer people also have money. But at the same time, they want it to be safe in case they don't spend enough money, A friend of mine was talking about getting traditionally published, and she writes a disabled romance. And the editor said to her, could you make your heroine less disabled? And that's a really good description of traditional publishing, when I think about it. It's really hard now to get an agent and to get a publisher. People go through hundreds of rejections, through many years of rejections. And then the traditional publisher puts out the book, gives it no promotion whatsoever, and just, disappears. A lot of people don't realize that there's this idea that if you're traditionally published, you've made it, and now you're going to be big. But the truth is that if you look at lists in magazines, web portals, what are the 30 books we cannot wait for this year? That's actually maybe 50, 60 books, just in different order. Those are the books that get the marketing push, out of thousands that come out and don't get that marketing push. So I signed the traditional contract for storytellers because it was on my conditions. My artistic decisions, I was not limited in any way. The book did not get abridged or edited or changed. The cover is my design. I picked the narrator. The narrator actually took a few lessons of Icelandic, and then I recorded a video for him to learn how to pronounce the names. So this is exactly my book, the way I want it to. And the only thing they do is give me money for it. And I guess release it. So that's a traditional publishing contract I would be willing to take anytime, yes. I tell you what to do and you give me money. We can work like this. But in indie publishing, I can just do whatever I want. And that's the beauty of it. And there's also the messiness of it, because it's, as I said, I have 3 books in 3 genres, and a traditional publisher wouldn't let me get away with this. But those books are what I want them to be. In children, I rewrote some scenes 40, 50 times so that they would be exactly as I wanted them to be. And if I had a traditional editor, that editor would probably go, yeah, I don't like this part. Done. Fix it. So, yeah, I think within 5 years or so, the critics that currently don't notice self-publishing are going to suddenly be like, oh, we've been championing self-publishing for decades, just, very quietly. And traditional publishing is just going down, unless they start adapting the techniques of indie publishers.
What do you think about, again, it's not traditional publishing isn't for everyone, just like indie publishing isn't for everyone. There's been a lot of, Steve and I have talked about this with various guests about, people who made the transition. Steve has interviewed many of those. Steve had Jonathan French, the author of The Grey Bastards, the Montland series, who won a previous SPFBO. We've seen a lot of SPFBO writers specifically who've got some acclaim in SPFBO, semi-finalists, finalists, winners, who've gone on to get traditional publishing contracts, specifically on the heels of SPFBO. Perhaps some of them had agents, perhaps some of them didn't, but as a result of the acclaim garnered through SPFBO, it just raised their profile that much more. And Bjorn, I think, was the one that said, and he and I had a good laugh about it, that traditional publishers, sometimes we feel that they're lazy and they're just looking, SPFUO makes it easy for them to discover, an author.
It's true. That's what they do. That's exactly what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. So if Orbit or Gollancz or Tor or HarperCollins backs up a truck of money to your door with the high six figures, put you on the spot here, would you take the deal?
It depends. Yeah, never say never, of course, but it largely depends on how much creative freedom I would be left with. Because I have read an article about a lady who had a really nice publishing contract with Amazon, because Amazon now has its own publishing companies. And she got one of those contracts with a very nice advance, and she paid it back because what the Amazon editor was doing with her book was not the book she wanted her name on. So I would be the same. Yeah, of course I would take $100,000. Like, I'd be like, no, I don't like money. I'm not one of those material people. Yeah, but if in exchange to that, for instance, I had to make Magni straight in children, or take boy out, for instance, from the book, then I would say no. That wouldn't be the book I want to write. I think everybody has a different, what word do I use? Sort of, not opinion, but like threshold of what they are willing to change versus what they're not. I kind of think that I sounded really arrogant earlier on talking about, what I think about traditional publishing, but that's what I personally think. And I know a lot of people want that traditional contract, and I'm never going to tell them they're wrong. And they have certain hopes, and those hopes might come true or might not come true. You don't know. And maybe tomorrow I discover an email saying, we watched this podcast and it was amazing. Here's $500,000. I'll be like, ooh, well, now I'm glad to destroy my books completely, I don't know. This isn't so clean cut as yes or no.
Yeah, absolutely.
It depends.
I have the good fortune that I consider you a dear friend, so I get to talk to you regularly. And I can tell people, and I think Steve's realizing, that simply put, you're funny as hell. Humor is something that's just part of you. It comes naturally. And of course, you write satire. And for those of you who haven't read Wild and Drinks, frankly, if you read the reviews on Wild and Drinks by Bjorn, you'll see a lot of people, including myself, comparing you to the esteemed Terry Pratchett, because that's how talented you are in terms of the satire and the ironic wit. And do you feel that being funny is something that just comes naturally to you? Like, is that something that is I mean, when you write a humorous book, because I don't write satire and I don't consider myself particularly funny, is that something that it just comes out of you when you write a satire book? Like, how do you incorporate that? Are there purposeful jokes that you have to think about, or how does that come out in your writing?
That's a really good question. Joan Rivers, she was a comedian. She died a while ago. There was this documentary about Joan Rivers, and she showed this huge room with shelves filled with index cards. And she said, every time I come up with a joke, I write it down and I put it on an index card. Because those index cards, this is my money, this is my living. And I thought, well, I'm not that organized, but I do have a file that when I come up with something, I'm going to write it down because I forget things. Wild and Drinks, in the beginning when I wrote it, the first version of the first story creation, it was just silly. And then I sent it for better reads to a friend, Lyra Wolf, and she said that she really liked the psychological parts, which I thought people would be like boring, but I didn't want to take them out. So then I put more emphasis on the philosophy. And when I added 3 more stories, it became a kind of coherent whole about power, responsibility, and consequences. And it's actually based on the opposing visions of Calvin and Hobbes, the philosophers, who actually happen to have inspired Calvin and Hobbes, the comic strip. And that is the hardest part, to take those philosophical thoughts you have and like, what is the nature of life kind of thing. Would you want to know the future? What happens to you when you know the future? What are the consequences of your actions, and so on? And you have to take that and make it funny. And that is actually work. Because, yeah, I naturally get silly. And when I'm nervous, I get super silly. And then people are like, I don't know what you mean by this. But in writing, it's not easy. Also, because you have to get the proportion right. You will never make everybody happy, because humor doesn't work like this. But you have to get the the proportions right. Is this still funny? Or is this now just entering, like nasty territory? Is this a joke? Is this an anecdote? Or is this a jab at someone in the book or outside of the book? So Why Odin Drinks was not an easy book to write, and I'm working on the sequel, which is called Bloodbath and Beyond. And it's also not an easy book to write, because it examines the visions of wars between societies from the point of view of Rousseau. And I forgot the second one name. Descartes, possibly. Well, it's philosophical visions of war between societies, like why societies go to war. And of course, it has to do with current events. And it has to do with the stories I was already writing. So now I have to put all this together and make it funny. And it's difficult. It's difficult to get the proportions right, because there are certain things that will never be funny, and you will laugh at them. So I try to keep those off the page.
Humor and verbally is tough, because it's a lot about timing to try and get whether you want to make someone laugh. How do you get that timing when you write? Is there a certain technique that you use to write humor, to have that timing that you can make someone laugh?
No. I read this quote, I don't remember who said it, a few weeks ago, saying that if you have an idea, don't keep it for later, throw it in now, right now. Don't keep it for the next chapter, don't keep it for the next book, just put it in immediately. And that's how I'm writing humor. If I have a joke, if it fits, if it's not completely out of place, it goes in now. And I like kind of surreal things. Quenby Olson, a friend of mine, writes this kind of self-aware book, where the book is aware that it's a book. Virginia McCline's Victoria Marmot series opens with 2 characters fighting for who's going to narrate the book. And I love that. I started reading that and I thought, I have no idea what this is, but I love it. And I'm trying to do the same thing. So I will have a bit with italics, and those italics will really change the weight of what is being said. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. I'm going to make a joke about those italics. And the book kind of becomes meta. It's making a joke about making a joke.
That's incredible.
But I don't really think about pacing, only in the very beginning and the very end of the chapter. At the very end of Why Odin Drinks, that end is really thought of. But the rest is just, hey, I came up with this.
Well, I can tell you the end is extremely impactful and still lingers with me. And
I did not know, that I finished this book before the current events. And then I sent copies for review, and reviewers said that it's uncanny that I seem to have predicted the current events. I don't want to give too much of a spoiler, but I think people can guess what I mean. And I reread that, and I thought, it is uncanny. I'm freaking myself out with this.
Yeah, it was really uncanny. It was very, it was prescient. It was very, yeah. It still gives me a chill when I think about that dialogue between those two characters. It still gives me a chill. So brilliantly done. And the italics joke definitely worked because I was laughing quite a bit about it, and I actually put that quote in my review because it was one that really
Okay.
stood out. So. Um,
I had fun writing that.
Yeah, it seemed like it. It seemed like you enjoyed yourself writing that book, and it came out in the writing, and it was again an exceptional book. So um, I want to ask, so if I may, so you identify as being neurodivergent, um, on the spectrum. We have a lot of authors, who identify that way. Um, How has that impacted your writing? Do you feel? How has that? What part has that played in your writing?
Oh, the first thing I come up with is actually technical. I was not diagnosed autistic yet. My diagnosis, by the way, in case anybody would like to know, that is autism, ADHD, and currently complex PTSD in remission, and either bipolar disorder or not. So I'm absolutely fascinating. My file in the psychiatric clinic is like this big. Sometimes someone new says, "Oh, I'm going to read that," and I'm like, "I don't think you will." Anyway, when I was writing Storytellers, I read this advice that says, "Show, don't tell." Like, you're not supposed to say that Gunnar was afraid, but you're supposed to say that there were butterflies in his stomach and the hairs on his forearms stood up and he was a bit sweaty. And I didn't quite know how to do that. So I actually bought a book on body language. And I was like, so when someone's scared, so this is what happens when someone's scared. Okay, I'm going to write that then. I didn't realize. I had no idea that other authors don't do that. And when I finished Storytellers, I wrote Gunnar, apparently, I found out later, as autistic. But I thought I was writing him as just socially anxious and depressed and similar to myself. So clearly, the way my brain works influenced Gunnar's brain. And that was also one of those incredible achievements. I don't know if achievement is the right word. I got an email at some point from someone who read Storytellers and said that now that he knows that Gunnar is autistic and he sees himself so much in this book, he's going to go and get assessed for autism. And I thought, oh my God, I might change someone's life. In children, I was already more aware of the autistic part, but not of the PTSD. So that has definitely shaped this book, but unconsciously. And with Odin, I honestly don't know. I don't really sit and think about myself, oh, I'm neurodivergent. This is so fascinating, I'm going to decide to let this influence my writing. It's just there. And I guess I write what I write. And often it's unconscious. But when I was writing Magni, I was very deliberately writing an autistic character based on myself. This book is very autobiographical. And a part of it were his interactions with women in the beginning. There is a woman who is very clearly showing him that she's interested, so to say, and Magni has no idea this is happening. And this is based on my personal experience. Only Magni at that point is 13 years old, and I was 22. I was actually in Berlin with some friends, and I went on the dance floor, and they were at the bar, and then I came back. I was like, oh, I need to drink something. And they were like, so what do you think about the guy? Like, what guy? The guy that's been hitting on you all this time. Like, there's been a guy hitting on me all this time? He was dancing around you. He was like attracting your attention all the time. I didn't realize anybody was trying to attract my attention. I was dancing. So I based a few Magnus scenes on that particular event. And this is where my brain affects the way I write, because I know that this is something that happens to people with a brain like mine. You not only don't read signals, you don't know there are signals.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Yeah. I want to say, I know for, I don't want to speak on behalf of you. I'm sure, though, to a certain extent, you feel the same. I know one of the things that has got me through the down times as a writer, besides my lovely wife Debbie, who's also my partner in entrepreneurship, has been people like you, especially you, one of my my best friends in the writing community. And you and I are both part of all sorts of different networks and of writers and our little writer friend groups. One of ours includes people like that you and I share, includes people like Holly Tinsley and Tim Hardy and Jacob Sanix and some fantastic indie writers. I know that that's got me through some of those really rough moments, especially when you're coping with imposter syndrome and things like that. What gets you through the down times of the downside of writing when you're not really feeling good about your work, or when things are tough, or what? I know for me it's my support networks, definitely. But what gets you through?
The same, exactly the same. Imposter syndrome is the worst, and just getting this, not as much writer's block as writer's pause. I think about it, but that pause can last for months. And just talking to people who have been in this situation and who really understand what this feels like. Who know that I say that, oh my God, the book I'm writing is absolutely horrible and it sucks. They're like, I know exactly what you mean, and it's not true. And you will know that a month from now, right now you feel like this, and this is okay. So yes, very much support networks. And people like you as well.
Yeah, it's such a blessing to have friends like yourself, Bjorn, and people that are close to me that help me get through those times, because they can get pretty dark, right? But then, like you said,
that's saying that writing is a lonely profession. That's a really stupid saying. Writing absolutely is not a lonely profession. You need a lot of people around you to be able to write, and not just like editors, proofreaders, and cover designers, but like, I have no idea how I would go on without being able to just bounce from other writers who understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a couple more questions here, and I want to respect your time. I know you're busy, and but so you said that you're a bit of not necessarily a pantser, but perhaps more of a pantser than someone like me who obsessively plans, to the degree that I know that I'm nuts.
Well, but you're kind of special like that.
Yeah, special. Yeah. So, and I know you may not know where you're going or what you're doing, but, and without giving away any big secrets, is there anything specifically you want to do or you want to accomplish with your books that you write in the future, that you want to, get written? I know you said working on romance, and it was an M&M romance. Like what are the things that you envision yourself perhaps doing that you can share, like, without giving away any major projects? What are some of the things you think you might want to do with your writing?
You know how corporations have a mission and vision statement? So my vision statement is that I want to write books I will not be ashamed of 5 years later. And my mission statement is to bring the Norse gods and the North, the Scandinavia, Iceland especially, to people. So this is my big vision. And in the meantime, I just want to learn about people by writing about them. That's why I rewrote some of the scenes in Children, especially 40, 50 times, because I really wanted to understand who those people are. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, definitely.
I would study psychology, I think, in some different life, I'm probably a psychologist.
Yeah. So I guess my final question, and I want to give Steve an opportunity to pose in that he has, is that you know, do you have any advice for anyone who's writing? I know I've talked about this too. Like we never consider ourselves writing experts who've only written so many books. There's people we had Miles Cameron on here earlier who's written 40 something books, and he still says he feels like he's in some ways a novice. He's learning things as you go along. And we all learn. Like, do you have any? But from the perspective of someone who has written several books and has done quite well with them, do you have any writing advice for the new authors, the unpublished authors who are aspiring to write a book, that are looking to people like you for hey, some guidance, some nuggets of wisdom? Do you have anything for them that?
I heard the word wisdom used in the same sentence as me, and that's just funny. I don't like giving advice because I don't really feel qualified. One thing I'm going to say is, don't write for money. If you think you're going to get rich from writing, then just go play the lottery. You have better chances. Assume you're going to lose a lot of money on this, a lot of time and a lot of money. And if you don't, you'll be really pleasantly surprised. I don't know if that counts as advice. And also get an editor. That's, I cannot overstate, get an editor. And listen to what the editor says. You might disagree, but listen. It's the thing about the rules. Learn the rules, and then you can break them.
I think
Without my editor, my books wouldn't be readable, honestly.
I think that's some wisdom. I think that's definitely some wisdom. So I just want to give Steve an opportunity to to ask anything before we start going towards wrapping up.
I had two questions for you that I like to ask guests when I can. Is the first one is, do you have any favorite family recipes?
Sort of. When I was a kid, back in communism, often there just wasn't much food. That's actually why the communism has fallen, because you can live without freedom, you can live without religion, you cannot live without food. So once they just ran out of money, it just had to end. So a lot of recipes back then that I remember from my childhood, it's weird how really cheap food can become your comfort food. Cabbage plays a huge role in Polish cuisine. And that's because a lot of the time you didn't have any meat, but you had cabbage. Do you know what bigos is?
I don't.
So bigos today is this kind of sauerkraut dish with various sorts of meats and spices. But the real bigos, a few centuries earlier, was just all sorts of meat. But then the peasants couldn't afford that. So they replaced a lot of the meat with just sauerkraut. And this is what bigos is today. I've learned that when I was watching MasterChef, and there was a Polish chef, and he said that he's going to make bigos, and he's getting all of this meat out. And I'm like, you don't even know what bigos is. And I looked it up, and he was correct. I wasn't. So my childhood food is my comfort food. It's not a lot of recipe, really. I generally look stuff up online. But the stuff that I used to complain that, oh my God, grandma made this again. And now it's like, I don't really feel great. I'm going to make exactly this thing that grandma used to make.
So the second question I had was, what was your first job?
My first job was delivering pizza leaflets to people's post boxes. And my proper first job was accidentally becoming an assistant of a graphic designer. I studied mathematics, and I went to study maths, and it kind of didn't occur to me what kind of jobs you get with this degree. until I got closer to finishing it. And my mom said, "Oh, I cannot wait to see you working at the bank in a suit or in insurance. You'll make so much money." I was like, in a suit, in a bank? I mean, do I look like someone who wants to work in a suit in a bank? And I met a really good graphic designer by accident via Susan Vega mailing list. And long story short, at some point the phone rings and it's him, and he's asking, would you feel like becoming an assistant to this really good graphic designer who also happens to be a professor at the Academy of Fine Arts? Let me think about it. Yes. And this is how I became a graphic designer, and I stayed in that profession for 16 years.
Well, again, based on your covers, I mean, and I know now you have an artist, but you have phenomenal. You obviously have all the talent in the world to do that. So, but I wanted to again, we want to respect your time. You've been so generous with it, Bjorn. Thank you so much. We're so humbled to have you on Page Chewing. It was a blast. Before we close off, can you please tell us a bit about where to buy your books? Your preferred social media handles. If someone's looking to get a hold of you for business purposes, how do we get a hold of you and all of that?
I finally updated my website. So you can just go to www.bjornlarssen.com, and it has everything. It has purchase links, and if you scroll a bit on the first page, it has about me, and it has the social media links. So that's all finally in one spot. It took me way too long to do that. And for just Odin, you can go to www.whyodindrinks.com, and it takes you straight where you need to be. I'm mostly active on Twitter. I mostly forget Facebook exists because the more they redesign it, the less I use it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm on Instagram and sometimes I'm not. Mostly on Twitter.
Okay, fantastic. And Steve, how do the masses get a hold of the popular Steve Talks books?
I'm not popular, but you can find me on Twitter at Steve Talks Books. I'm also on Vero or Page Chewing. We have our blogs, our forum, some other stuff going on there. So the calendar, if you're curious about any upcoming episodes, and it can all be found there.
Yeah. And as for me, I'm PL Stuart, and www.plstewart.com is my website if you want to know about the books in the Drowned Kingdom saga and what's coming next. And I have a blog there, and also, look at that cutie.
This is what's been distracting me.
Oh my gosh, no wonder. Gorgeous. Yeah, sorry. So also do author
I'm sorry,
interviews.
I just want to squeal right now.
I know. I want to
Hello.
take him.
Okay,
her.
sorry. Go on.
No, not at all. Gorgeous. Yeah, so I have also do author interviews, written interviews on my website called 6 Elemental Interviews, 6 questions posed to creatives. Bjorn has graced me with one in the past. So, and of course, Twitter is my preferred social media platform. Well, and like Bjorn, like I'm on Facebook now and again. I'm on Instagram somewhat more regularly, but most of the time it's Twitter. DMs are open. You have a question, please don't hesitate to contact me. You want to talk writing or anything, my dears. Or I love engaging with people and talking. I like to think I'm a pretty friendly, approachable guy. So, and of course, Page Chewing with Steve, which has been one of the highlights of my writing, entrepreneurial career so far. I'm blessed to be part of this collaboration. We just want to mention quickly, we also have May Between the Pages Taylor, wonderful blogger who's also now involved with Page Chewing. So it's only just keeps getting bigger and better. We have guests like Bjorn on, and like just the caliber is just, we keep saying like, oh my gosh, like, can this get any better? And it just keeps getting better and better. So we're very humbled and thankful to people like Bjorn for being willing to.
You were talking about success. How do you guys handle the success?
Steve, how do you
keep trying to get better, I guess. Keep things in perspective. I don't know if we're very successful yet, but having a lot of fun.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm successful yet. I don't, and like you said, Bjorn, you don't realize where you are, right? And I know that I think I've made progress as a writer. I think I'm getting better slowly. I know I have a long way to go to keep improving. I got, today I was on earlier with Christian Cameron, and this iconic writer that I look up to so much. He's saying all these things about these favorable things in the book. I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. Like you said, like you had that Joanne Harris moment where you're just like, Joanne Harris loves my book and has burned my book. Like, I literally didn't know what to say, but like I said, I guess we never realize when we reach those milestones till after you look back and you reflect and go, wow, Joanne Harris, like she liked my book and she's gonna burn my book. And but yeah, I'm just trying to enjoy the ride and just trying to give back as much as possible, because as much as you look up to Joanne Harris and you have many milestones to achieve, and I look up to Miles Cameron, like someone is looking up, and Steve may look up to you, Jimmy Nuts or whatever. We there's someone else who's looking up to us, and I try to keep that in mind, and it's basically about empowering them, helping them, and boosting them above us, bringing everyone else into it. That's what I feel like I will succeed when I know there's people who have flown past me in terms of success. I think that's when you succeeded. So
I wanted to say thank you so much, Steve, for doing this.
Oh yeah, it's been my pleasure. I've been wanting to chat with you for a long time, so I'm glad that we were able to make it work.
I'm not just talking about myself. I mean, thank you so much for doing the podcast.
Oh yeah, it's great.
That's how we authors get to be seen by people, thanks to people like you, and that's very important to us. So thank you.
Sure, I'm having a great time.
Yes, Steve, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for everything you do for our community, and you're so well respected and beloved there. And again, I'm so honored to you decide on me. I'm like I said, when you asked me to do this, I'm like, me? You want me to do this? But it's been great, and you've become such a dear friend, and I'm honored to do it. And we'll just keep going.
Yeah, just keep having fun, doing the right things.
So once again, everybody, thank you so much for joining Bjørn Larssen and Steve and I on today's podcast. And I guess we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, see everybody.
Thank you very much for having me. Cheers.
Thank you. Take care.